This is If My People Bible Reading, part 221. We are in the book of Hebrews in chapter 8, right at the beginning. So, now we've established the Melchizedek priesthood. Yeshua representing every single bit of that. And it says big change is coming. It's no longer doing what you used to do. So, does all of the Torah of the Old Covenant, is it thrown out? No. Royal Torah remains. The Ten Commandments will never change. And the two greatest commandments within the Ten Commandments will never change. And there is so much reading you have to understand by reading the Old Covenant. And once you come into the light of the New Covenant, Yeshua, you understand it. You understand much more because what Paul is saying is about we now are standing on a firm foundation. Who is that foundation? Who is that cornerstone? Yeshua. Who is the capstone of the foundation? Yeshua. Torah will always exist. What the Christians have a terrible time understanding is, how many Christians do you know and understand the 1050 New Testament Torah that we're reading to? Everything we read, we noted here, this is Torah. Here it comes. That's what he's talking about. It's all changed. And for Hebrew roots, you don't stick back and try to figure out the 613 commandments. You read them, you understand them, you read the Bible from beginning to end, starting at the beginning of the Word. And we started in Joel because that's where it all begins. And now that we're reading this Bible in a order that it was given by the scrolls and when they were written, just like in the entire book of Ezekiel, there were 13 scrolls. And many times if you don't read it, you got to understand, look at the dates. Ezekiel gives the dates on there. Read them in the order that he wrote them. Now, the first part of Ezekiel, when you first open it up, the introduction, it's giving you like a beginning, introduction, salutation to everything. It's actually the last thing he wrote is the first one because it's kind of given an introduction. He's saying, now this happened in so-and-so. That's how Ezekiel starts with what? You're reading scroll 13 first. And then you hear the story. And guess what? That's exactly how the Bible is to be read. We start with Job because it was written first and it gets a beginning, introduction, ending. You end up with all these questions and you go, oh. Then when you get to Genesis 1:1, you understand it very clearly. There is an evil person named Satan. There is an eternal, omnipotent, ever forgiving, always loving Yahweh. And he does have a son. But how does this mix in the scheme of life? Oh, I could depend on my friends who were Christians. Well, could Job depend on his friends? Nope. And when the young man was in there, that was actually 4 there, not 3. The 4th guy, the young kid, they usually spoke last in Arabic conversations in the Far East. In the Middle East, the elders speak first, and the young, when there's time, get to speak last. So that's why this kid speaks last, and he doesn't do any better than anybody else. You see how it all flows? So now we're in chapter 8, and it starts right off. This is typical Paul. The point of what we're saying is this. Here's the point. We do have such a high priest who sat down at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heaven and who serves in the sanctuary, the true tabernacle set up by Elohim, not by man. And every high priest is appointed to offer gifts and sacrifices, so it is necessary for this one, Yeshua, to have something to offer. Who's he presenting to the Father for sacrifice? Lambs and goats and blood and guts? Your blood, your guts. You're a living sacrifice. That's who he's going to present to his Father as his bride. It's right here. That's what we should be paying attention in the Christian churches and Hebrew roots. Right there. Okay. Let's go to verse 10. This is the covenant Now it's a new covenant, newer and better covenant. I will make with the house of Israel after that time, declares Yahweh. That means after that time. Means exactly what it says. On his return, I will put my Torah in their minds and write them in their hearts permanently with permanent ink. So, is permanent, perfect Torah written in our hearts right now? If it is, we're certainly not paying attention to it. We're still sinning. We're still repenting. We're still correcting on a daily basis in this walk that we're on. I will be their Elohim. I'm still in verse 10. And they will be my people. No longer will a man teach his neighbor or a man his brother, saying, know Yahweh, because they will all know me, from the least to the greatest. For I will forgive their wickedness and remember their sins no more. That means it can't be now. It can't be once you get saved. Because you are sinning. And he's not doing this. Okay? By calling this covenant new, because many people have argued, Bruce, it's not a new covenant, it's renewed. It's new. He has made the first one obsolete. And what is obsolete and aging will soon disappear. Will soon disappear. So at the time when Paul wrote this, is it still there? Yes. Is this what he fights for over and over again? What is he fighting with? What kind of tools is he fighting with? What kind of power and what kind of weapons? He uses the word of the Father. And what is the word of the Father? Every single Torah statement we're giving you. 1,050 Torah statements in the New Covenant. There is rarely, how many churches out there, ask you, how many churches out there teach 1,050 new Torah commands and use the word Torah and use the word commands and call it new? I'd love to hear from you so I can update my intelligence. How many Hebrew roots? There's only like 30 different factions, so that's easier to check out than the 30,000 Christian churches by their names. I would love to hear from one of you that in congregations that you meet, you use this in your weekly portion Torah readings. I challenge anyone on the end of this, it's right here. Did you hear what I just said? Just show me one. Yet I would go to their congregation just like that if I was invited. Now the first covenant, chapter 9, verse 1, had regulations for worship and also an earthly sanctuary. And he explains it. The new temple, us. The sacrifices, we are the living sacrifices. The giving of offerings and so forth in the millennial time, yeah. Who's it for? The Levites, taking care of the sanctuary oblation area period, located way, way north of Jerusalem, more like in the town of Bethel, which would be the center location. It's all there that we read so far. It's all there. The ark, do they build another ark? Let me ask you this. Did Yeshua, it's where he dwelled, did he ever look for it? When he was on earth walking around for 18 months during his ministry, did he ever say, hey, disciples, we're not going fishing today. Today we're going to look for my ark. I know it's around here somewhere. It's in a secret place. Verse 8, the Ruach HaKodesh was showing by this that the way of the most holy place had not yet been disclosed as long as the first tabernacle was still standing. When Yeshua was standing and he was the tabernacle of all high priests right there in the temple area, they didn't get it. That's why it ended the way it did. Let's go to verse 14. How much more? Now we're in chapter 9. How much more then will the blood of Messiah, though who the eternal Ruach offered himself unblemished to Yahweh, cleanse our consciousness from acts that lead to death, so that we may serve the living Elohim? For this reason, Messiah is the mediator of the new covenant, not the old covenant, for those who are called and may receive the promised eternal inheritance, so that he has died as a ransom to set free from the sins committed under the first covenant. Verse 16, in the case of a will, it is necessary to prove death of the one who made it, because a will is enforced only when somebody has died. It never takes effect while the one who made it is living. This is why even the first covenant was not put into effect without blood. Just go down to verse 25. Nor did he enter heaven to offer himself again and again and again and again. We don't have to go every Friday and every Saturday and confess our sins and do this over and over again to a priest anymore. We are the priest. We need to confess our sins to ourselves, which goes straight through the temple, ourselves to the Father. The way the high priest entered the most holy place every year with blood that is not his own. It's our own blood now. We are the living sacrifice. Verse 26, then Messiah would have had to suffer many times since the creation of the world, but now he has appeared once and for all at the end of the ages to do away with sin by the sacrifice of himself. He has appeared once and for all at the end of the ages. Just as a man is destined to die once and after that to face judgment. Verse 26, so Messiah was sacrificed once to take away the sins of many people, and he will appear a second time, not to bear sin, but to bring Yeshua to those who are waiting for him. We're going to see Yeshua. Chapter 10. The Levitical law. Here we go. The Torah law, the Levitical law, is only a shadow of the good things that are coming, not the reality themselves. For this reason, it can never, by the same sacrifices, repeatedly, endlessly, year after year, make perfect those who draw near to worship. If it could, would they not have stopped being offered? For the worshippers would have been cleansed once and for all, and would no longer have to be felt guilty for their sins. But those sacrifices are an annual reminder of sins, because it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away the penalty of sins. Therefore, when Messiah came into the world, verse 5, he said, sacrifice the offering you did not desire, but a body you prepared for me. With burnt offerings and sin offerings you were not pleased. Then I said, here I am. It is written about me in a scroll. I have to come do my will, you, O Elohim. First he said, sacrifices and offerings, burnt offerings, sin offerings, you did not desire, nor were you pleased with them. He's talking to his Father. Although the Levitical law required them to be made. And then he said, here I am. I have come to do your will. He sets aside the first to establish the second, the newer and the better law. Day after day, every priest stands and performs his religious duties. Again and again, he offers the same sacrifices, which can never take away the penalty of sins. So what is the law? What is the law that was done away with, that we are no longer under? The penalty of sin is death. Then we're going to kick into some Torah. We're going to kick into some Torah and finish up 10 and 11 and 12 and 13. And there is a whole bunch of Torah. The Torah was supposed to be standing on. Okay? Torah will exist to the end of time because Yeshua is the living Torah. Shalom.